Chapter 15. The screaming started in the middle of the night. The long, eventful day had plunged Drew into a deep sleep, and the screaming had wormed its way into her dreams as a shrieking red bird caught in a tremendous, ropey spiderweb. The bird twisted and thrashed, struggling to free itself from the web's hold without success. When a giant spider began to climb up the web towards the bird, the screaming became unbearable, and Rue woke with a gasp. Standing over her bed was Miss Valentine, barefoot and dressed in a robe that hung askew. It seemed as if she too had woken suddenly. Her face, scrubbed of makeup, was tinged pink around the rims of her eyes and the wings of her nostrils, and her dark hair was disheveled. "Get up, Rue," she said. It was less an order than a plea. That was when Rue realized the screaming was real and not just in her dreams. It pierced the walls, hysterical and ragged, and was accompanied by a furious thumping. "What's he screaming about now?" Rue grumbled. "This is the worst we've ever seen him," Miss Valentine said. To Rue's amazement, she actually sounded frightened. "He's punching the walls, just wild. Violet can hardly restrain him. Please, can you see what you can do?" Rue groaned, but she got out of bed and started down the stairs. The screaming pounded through the house, echoing off the walls. It made Rue mad to hear it. She began to run, anxious to make it stop. The shrieks grew more and more hysterical, so that by the time Rue flung open Philip's door, her face was flushed with her own fury. Tangled in the sheets and the blankets, Philip was screaming and tossing in his bed while Violet attempted to hold him down. When she lost her grip on one of his hands, it flew to her face and clawed at it. "Stop it!" Rue screamed at him. "Stop it right now!" But the attack did not let up. Philip seemed beyond hearing, and he slapped at Violet as she tried to grab a hold of his wrist again. Enraged, Rue ran across the room, grabbed the Gila monster off the shelf, and threw it against the wall as hard as she could. It made an awful cracking sound, and the bones clattered to the ground. "That's one!" Rue called at him. "If you don't stop screaming, I'll smash them all." "No, Rue!" Violet cried. "You'll make him worse." Her face was badly scratched, and her lower lip was bleeding. "I hate you!" Rue shrieked at Philip. She picked up another skeleton and smashed it, then another and another, until finally she realized that the screaming had stopped. The only noise left was the cracking of bones and her own cries of rage. She looked over at the bed. Philip now lay quietly in Violet's arms, and they were both watching her, shocked, their faces still damp with perspiration from their struggle. The door opened, and Miss Valentine stood at the threshold. For a moment she was silent, aghast at the wreckage of bones strewn across the floor, with Rue in the center of it. "What have you done?" she demanded of Rue. "She stopped him, is what," Violet said, tipping her head toward Philip. He was pale and his eyes were glassy, but he was calm. Violet settled Philip back in bed. He lay as docile as an infant, as she untangled and straightened the sheets and blankets and arranged them neatly over him. It infuriated Rue that Violet could be so kind to him after what he'd done. The scratches on her face were raised and pink now, and blood had dried on her lip, forming a small, dark blotch. "Shut your eyes," Violet crooned at him. He shut them obediently, but when she stood up to leave, he opened them again. "Rue will stay," he murmured. "Of course she will," Miss Valentine said stiffly. "No, I won't," Rue said. Miss Valentine shot a warning glance at her. "I don't care. I won't," Rue insisted. "He's repulsive." "He can't help it when he gets into fits like this," Violet said gently. "He can help it," Rue said. He's just used to doing whatever he likes." Philip was watching her from his bed, and now she glared at him. "You can help it," she insisted to him, her voice raw. They stared at each other for a moment. Philip looked away, then back at her. "Please stay," he said. "There," Violet said, getting up and walking over to Rue to give her shoulder a squeeze. "That's as nice as anyone could ask." She guided Rue over to the bed, and Rue let her, but she would not sit down next to Philip. Arms crossed against her chest, she stood there as Violet and Miss Valentine left the room. "Are you cold?" Philip asked. "You look cold in that nightgown." "I'm fine," she replied stonily. "Here." With some difficulty he peeled back one of the covers. "Put this around you." It was the way that he struggled to maneuver the blanket, so weak and fumbling. It made her feel a little less furious at him. She reached out and snatched a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. She was cold in the thin nightgown. "Why did you hurt Violet?" she asked him, her voice still harsh. "Why do you care so much about her?" he said, suddenly peevish. "Why does she care so much about you?" Rue shot back. "Because my father feels guilty, so he pays people to care about me," Philip said. "Violet would be nice to you no matter what," Rue insisted. "That's just how she is. And anyway, what does your father have to feel guilty about?" After a moment, he said, "Because he can't stand to be around me. That's why he's never here. He really only ever wanted my mother, not me, and now that she's gone, he hires people to be with me since he doesn't want to." Rue would have liked to contradict this. She would have liked to accuse her cousin of feeling sorry for himself, yet she couldn't help but to admit that it might be true. "Well, maybe if you didn't bite him, he'd want to be around you more," Rue countered. "He deserved it," Philip said, his expression hardening. "Why?" "He told me he might send me away to Dr. Orlett's clinic in Rochester. He said that I would have to live there while they treated me for depression." "Maybe it would be a good thing," Rue said. "It would be a terrible thing!" Philip pulled his legs up and wrapped his arms around them like he was already trying to root himself in the room. "She won't be at some clinic." "Who won't?" "My mother." "Philip, I know what you think. You think I'm crazy. So does my father. Violet says that I'm dreaming when I hear her. But it's not a dream, and I'm not crazy. I hear her calling for me through the walls. I heard her tonight, clearer than ever." Rue opened her mouth just to tell him that his mother was gone, just like her father was. But then she remembered when she had first seen her uncle, how he had looked so much like her father she thought it was him, though it made no sense, and how her whole body had filled with happiness at the sight of him. "Lie back on your pillow," she told him, and sat beside him. "Why?" "Just do it," she said. Once he lay back, Rue started. "There was once a little red and yellow boat called Pendragon." "I don't want to hear stories," he complained. "Shut up," Rue said, and instead of sailing in the water it flew above the tree tops in the sky. She told him the story about when Vincent landed on the island of Malta, and after some initial squirming, Philip lay still and listened. Before long he closed his eyes. His breathing gradually slowed, and when she stopped talking to Chuck, she saw that her cousin had fallen asleep. She pulled the cover up over his shoulders. He turned towards her in his sleep and tucked his legs up. For a while she stared at him. Sleep softened his face. It was a solemn face, like her own. She reached out and lightly touched his hair, so dark and thick, like his mother's hair, she guessed. The door opened a crack and Violet peered into the room. She glanced between Philip and Rue, shaking her head in wonder. "Well, look at this," she whispered. "Two waves smooth as glass. An old donkey granny could sail across the two of you in a pie pan and never fill a bump."